morning, everyone. So typically, when we talk about this functional safety, okay, what happens? There are multiple stakeholders involved, okay, because you have to work in a team. There will be multiple teams involved in that, okay. So typically, when you see, you have systems engineer in the team, you have software engineer, hardware engineer, and then there will be a quality engineer. And apart from that, the most important guy will be the FUSA engineer, okay, functional safety engineer, okay. But typically in EN 50128 and EN 50126, typically you talk about systems engineer, software engineer, hardware engineer, and quality engineer. So these person needs to form a particular team, okay, and these teams should be involved in these type of activities, okay. So if you'll see how this entire development looks like, okay. So let's say you talk about EN 50126. So basically, you are talking about the hardware reliability. Okay. So EN 5026, 50126 basically talks about the hardware reliability, where you talk about the reliability, availability, maintainability, and safety. Okay. And then you have EN 50128. Okay. So this typically talks about the software development. Okay. So you talk about software supporting process, and obviously it has to be complied with the software safety integrity level SIL. Okay, so safety integrity level means the risk level over here. Okay, so you have to specify the SIL for all those development, and then you have safe software requirements. Then you go with the architecture development. You go with the module development, and then you go with the testing of every modules and integrate integration testing and all. Okay, and even the maintenance comes into EN 50126, sorry, 128. Okay, so EN 50126 typically talks about the hardware, and EN 50128 typically talks about the software. Okay, then you have EN 50129. So this is basically you have electronic system signaling. Okay, so what happens now? This is basically what we cover in railways. Okay, you bifurcate the system into hardware, software, and the system level, and you perform the safety analysis on them. Okay, so how will you define risk level? Because in every standard you have to specify risk level. Okay, and every standard have their own risk level, right? And have their own criteria to determine the risk level. Okay, so in railways, typically you determine the risk level on the basis of how the stakeholders are involved. Okay, so when we talk about the stakeholders, so basically you have this particular diagram. Okay, for let's say SIL 0, you have let's say different stakeholders, and they will be of same organization, and same person can do multiple activities. So let's say requirement manager, and then you have a software architect, and then you have implementation person. Okay, so all these three activities can be done by a same person. Requirement management, or let's say software architecture development, and the implementation of the software can be done by the same person. Okay, and similarly integrator or the tester, and the verification and the validation can be done by the same person. Okay, obviously this entire thing will be staying in the same organization, but the audit has to be done by a separate entity itself. Okay, so SIL 0, anyways, it's a non-safety critical, you can say non-safety critical component. Okay. But once you come down to SIL 1 and SIL 2, there are very fine line differences with respect to the stakeholders. Okay. And then you talk about SIL 1. So the integration and testing can be done by the same person. Okay. But on the other hand, for SIL 2, the integration and testing has to be done by two different person. Okay, and then you have SIL 3 and SIL 4. Okay, so similarly you have verification and validation. So it comes down to the verification and validation typically. So for SIL 3 and SIL 4, because this is on the higher range of the risk level, okay, here the risk levels are high. Okay, so the verification will be done within the project management itself, but there has to be a separate entity for the validation of the work that you have done. Okay, within the same organization. Okay, so there are very fine line differences between SIL 0, SIL 1, SIL 2, SIL 3, and SIL 4. But you can see SIL 0 being the lowest, and SIL 4 being the highest of the risk level. Okay, and obviously the entire process will be done within the same organization, but the auditing needs to be done by a separate entity itself. Okay.